welcome to SA Space Services mission. We're going to start off by doing an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, My Security Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So welcome. This is our second to last session in the City Festival of Space that we've been running throughout November. Our last session will be coming up on Monday, which is going to be a session called Thriving in Space with UWA, which is quite a fitting session to end with. So today though, start off by doing a huge thank you to our sponsors. SmartSat, thank you very much for sponsoring. Fugo Spark, our gold sponsor, our official media channel Space and Defence, and our Women in Space sponsor Lockheed Martin Australia. So today we're doing SA Space Services mission. I'm going to ask all of the presenters to join me on screen and turn on their audio as well. So I have to say, you probably have to be living under a rock to not know that when it comes to space activity, South Australia are doing some really exciting things. So I think today's session is going to be very interesting. So I want to welcome each of our panelists. We've got Darin Lovett, who's the director of the South Australian Space Industry Centre, Pete Nikoloff, who is SmartSat Cannard Mission Director for SmartSat CRC, Jack Rintoul, who's Spacecraft Systems and Test Engineer at Inovor. We've got Alex Grant, who's the CEO at Myriota, and Dr. Sarah Cannard, who is our moderator, and she's the Industry Director at SmartSat CRC. So I'm not going to say much else. I'm going to hand over to you, Sarah, because yeah, very excited for the session. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jessica. So it really is my pleasure to be here today. Such an amazing series and looking forward to the final one next week as well. So it is my pleasure to host this session today on South Australia's first satellite, the SA Space Service Mission Cannard. So Cannard means responsibility and unconditional love for all creatures and encompasses the key principles of Aboriginal life, including creation, soul, family and land. It is an enormous caring with no limit and has no time frame and is eternal. So what a fabulous name for South Australia's first satellite. And I think Cannard is a lot easier to say than SA Space Services Mission, which is a bit of a tongue twister. So in this session, we're going to be hearing from this amazing panel and their involvement with Cannard. So after we hear from each of all of the panel members, we're going to go into a Q&A. And I invite you and encourage you to pop your question into the chat, which I've got monitored here, and we'll address those once everybody's gone through some of their introductions. In those questions that you're typing in, if your question is for a particular speaker, please add that in there as well, and that'll help us to direct who you would like a response from. Okay, now you're not here to listen to me rabble on, so it's my pleasure to introduce the first panel member today. So we have Darin Lovett, who is the Director of Space at the South Australian Space Industry Centre. His focus is on leveraging disruption, innovation and strong support to build a sustainable space industry in South Australia. He brings more than 25 years of experience in strategy and capability development for the airspace domains. His diverse background includes space operations and policy. He's a university lecturer, weapons test and evaluation. He's done airborne, anti-submarine and surveillance operations, coalition partnering and working on large-scale transformation projects. So certainly someone who has done a lot of amazing work over the time. So his space credentials include working as a staff officer in Australia's Joint Defence Space Coordination Office, 4 years at the US Executive Agent for Space within the Pentagon. He's a graduate of the International Space University and Chief of Australia's Space Operations Centre within HQ of Joint Operation Commands. So it's quite an achievement, Darin, and I'll hand over to you to give your presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to talk about Carnini, as you said, the Space Services Demonstrator, but much more familiarly known as Carnini now. I'm Darin Lovett, Director of Space for the SA Space Industry Centre, and I'm going to be talking just briefly just about how we sort of came about with this project and, sort of introduced, some of the wonderful team members that we have on board. Now, I'm just going to begin with a bit of strategy because we think this is an important part and an important element of what South Australia is trying to do. We released a strategy last year which sort of outlines what South Australia is going to focus on. And we have various niche areas and targets that we have described in there. But really, the main thing for us is this statement about our vision, which is to build a thriving and enduring South Australian space ecosystem. We want to support Australia's national space strategy, so not just defence or civil, but we think it should be, holistic and combined. And we certainly are focused more on building on the opportunities of new space. So that's many small mesh satellites rather than some of the larger ones you see going out to, say, geostationary orbit. What it means practically is we want to be launching satellites, we want to be managing them, controlling them from the ground, and we want to be taking the data back down and making that data really useful for our purposes on Earth and our life down here. Now, the partnership itself, three great consortiums or groupings together. We have the South Australian Space Industry Centre. I guess state government is the customer. We're looking to fund and support this program. We've got the SmartSat CRC, who you hear from, but that's a fantastic consortium as well, but they're leading the project. And then Myriota, who you'll hear from, and Inovor, who have fantastic technology and are game-changing companies in Australia. Now, you have mentioned the meaning of SASat, now Carnini, but one of the things I found fantastic about this project is we're using space to also inspire students and get people into the space industry. It's a wonderful way to either accelerate people who are thinking about getting into STEM or to keep them motivated for that long game as they move through mathematics and other areas. But not only that, we're also looking at biologists, ethicists, lawyers, people who understand risk, business, compliance, etc., to get on board and use space to motivate. Certainly, one of the things we did is we held a competition across all South Australian schools and sought responses back from all year levels, but each school could only submit one name. And I was on the review committee for the names that came in. Phenomenally broad vision from a lot of schools, and some of them down to as low as year 4. But we certainly had a lot of Aboriginal names came through, a lot of names with meaning, and so it was a really difficult decision to sort of narrow it down to one. But the competition was really exciting, and schools have now got a stake in this program as well, with the name going to Findon High School, being awarded to Findon High School for their choice. And we certainly had Aboriginal leadership and representation to sort of check and facilitate and make sure that we were doing the right thing and making sure it's consistent with the meaning that we thought. Now I'm just going to go through briefly the objectives and then I'll hand over. So we are really hoping to accelerate the space economy. Getting into space is quite hard and expensive. And for some of the companies, there's quite a barrier to entry. And so we're really trying to improve the supply chain by getting things into space. And we as a government are hoping to help pave the way for some of that activity that might not otherwise occur because it might go offshore because it's cheaper. And sometimes we just need to give that bit of a help up. We'd also like to improve the uptake of services in South Australian government. So we're already seeing with Carnini that we've got people like country fire services, we've got police, we've got environment and water, we've got the areas of roads and traffics, for example, looking at how they can use this satellite mission to support their use on the ground. And again, normally they wouldn't be able to use space technology, it'd be a bit too expensive or too tricky. We're going to be developing those applications, and Myriota and SmartSat CRC is certainly on board to help develop those applications to improve the way we do things on the ground. And then I think finally, we've got some cutting edge technology in here that I'm sure others will talk about. but we're also trying to enhance the experience of the Australian Space Discovery Centre with these missions being fed back into that, that venue. And so with that, that's my time. I'll hand over and stop my sharing, and we'll listen to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Right, thanks, Darin. So next we have Peter Nikoloff. So Pete is an executive director and co-founder of Nova Systems and is a senior weapons systems engineer. He obtained an aeronautical engineering degree from RMIT in 19 something something. I won't reveal that on your behalf, Pete. And has over 30 years of experience supporting defence and the space projects. So Pete has experience at the Woomera Test Range, and I can vouch for that, in safari suits at the range. And this experience includes supporting research and recent upgrade to operations for both military weapons systems and launch operations. So space is one of Nova's fastest growing areas, supporting defence military SATCOM, geospatial information systems, and satellite ground stations. So Nova's business has grown from 2, so Pete and Jim, for those that know, back in the 2000s, to over 600 staff today. So Pete is a strong advocate for growing the space industry in Australia and is a director of the Space Industry Association of Australia, a member of the South Australian Space Advisory Council, and the industry member of the SmartSat Cooperative Research Centre BID Executive. Pete was a member of the team that brought the International Aeronautics Conference to Adelaide in 2017, which was a catalyst for the establishment of the Space Agency. So over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Sarah. Let me just pull up my slides. Hopefully they all work this time. Can you see the slides okay?
Not yet. Oh, it's thinking about it. Yes,
thinking. Oh, excellent. Now, I'm super excited to be involved with this program. As Sarah mentioned, I was intimately involved with bringing IAC here, which I think was a catalyst for the Space Agency. We ran with the SmartSat CRC as an alternate bid if that didn't come up. And in the end, we got both. And now, as a result of these 2 great initiatives, as you can see, Australia's just actually now moving ahead in leaps and bounds in the space sector. And I guess this project shows how the state government is also helping to drive the growth of the space sector. So Cannard is an amazing example of, as Darin said, growing the heritage of some of our space businesses. But more importantly, the broader benefits it's going to provide to beyond just Inovor and Myriota is just going to be amazing. Is things moving? No, they're not. I love IT. It worked 5 minutes ago. Let me just see if I can get this thing working again. It's working now. Yeah, Darin went through the fabulous team. What I'll do is I want to talk a little bit about SmartSat, because that's one of the mechanisms that's really going to take full advantage of the Cannard mission. Now, there's just a picture of the spacecraft. I'm not going to talk about the detailed spacecraft because that's where we're going to get Myriota and Inovor talking in detail, because they're the ones actually building this amazing capability. With SmartSat, we were established a couple of years ago, and our primary role is to build future generation industry based on strong research foundation. We've got 3 core areas that we're driving. That includes advanced communications, and that's covered off. This spacecraft is doing that via the IoT payload. Amazing capability there, and Alex will run over that. The other 2 areas are really where SmartSats come in. So SmartSat basically identified the EO payload, the Earth observation payload, but it's also got advanced processing on board. So our other 2 focus areas of research is intelligence in satellite systems and Earth observation. So the satellite supports those 2 areas very strongly as well. So that's just how fantastic this spacecraft is, because it can do these model areas. For those that want to know a little bit more about the sensor itself, it's a very advanced sensor squeezed into a tiny space. It's got 48 bands in the visual near infrared area, another 3 bands in thermal infrared. And as I mentioned earlier, it's got a very advanced AI processor. And SmartSat has a team. We pulled together a whole lot of AI specialists and focusing on AI in space. And we'll be using this platform to help build that expertise. So the research benefit is going to be amazing. We've got almost 100 partners at SmartSat with every major space-related university, big industry, small industry, and startups. And we'll be using this platform to conduct research and build the IP that our industry can go out with and grow. So it's not just benefits to South Australia, it'll benefit the whole of Australia for our research program. The Earth observation area with such a sophisticated hyperspectral sensor covers just about all areas of interest. The big areas that we're doing a lot of work on will be around the agriculture and natural resources and the water management, which the state government is super interested in. But projects will also address other areas. So we're anticipating probably dozens of projects using the resource of this spacecraft over 3 years of its life. And finally, it's super exciting too. It's going to go into space on one of the most exciting launch vehicles in the world that is reusable and is pushing edges technology like we are here. So that's a quick overview of where I fit into the project, or SmartSat fits into the project. Over to you, Sarah.
Great, thanks, Peter. It's very exciting. So next we have Dr. Alex Grant. So Alex is the co-founder and CEO of Myriota, the global leader in low-cost, low-power, secure, direct-to-satellite connectivity of Internet of Things. So Alex is an award-winning entrepreneur and a researcher who defines his mission and that of Myriota as empowering every organisation to connect with opportunity. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Sarah. So, yeah, Myriota is really happy to be part of the Cannard mission and excitingly to be able to combine Internet of Things data connectivity and hyperspectral Earth imaging payloads on a single satellite that we're working very closely with Inovor to deliver and to operate for our state government customer. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Myriota IoT data service and for the Internet of Things. And it's fair to say that lack of connectivity limits uptake of digital services in remote areas, and that's been recognised, for example, in the South Australian AgTech Strategic Plan. But in fact, it's an instance of a broader problem of adoption for Internet of Things technologies. And for those who may not be familiar, I mean, Internet of Things is really about digital interaction with our environment through sensors and devices, and our particular interest here is for industrial purposes. And without connectivity, there simply is no digital transformation. We all believe that businesses have a lot to gain from digital transformation, but if you can't get the data, then you're doing things the manual, old-fashioned way. And there are significant barriers to adoption. Security and privacy is at the top of every list of barriers to adoption for IoT. Return on investment. So does the IoT project, the cost of deployment and operation really stack up in terms of the economic benefits delivered by the project? So the cost of these technologies is really critical, not just from a deployment point of view, but from an operations point of view. And then thirdly, as we've already talked about, the availability of affordable connectivity is another barrier to adoption, not just for remote areas, but actually anywhere. So these are the problems that Myriota solved to provide data access anywhere on the planet in a manner that's fit for purpose and affordable. So closing that business case for adoption is highly secure and private, with very, very sophisticated and high-grade security and privacy baked right into the foundations of the network infrastructure. And we do all of that with extremely long battery life as well. So in remote areas, you can imagine as soon as you need to go and visit a device to change a battery, that immediately breaks the business case. That's expensive to do. And so you need to have devices that have batteries that last many years, and that's what we've delivered. So now let's get this animation to play. So this is the constellation that is rapidly being built out as we speak, and Cannard will contribute an additional element to our IoT constellation. So you can see we have a planet-spanning infrastructure that's already serving customers in Australia and other countries around the world. And Cannard is going to bring some new capability in terms of the hyperspectral Earth imaging, in addition to contributing additional data from an IoT connectivity perspective. But that's all very exciting, and it's the first time that two payloads like that have been combined on a single satellite, which is great. Oops, let's go to the next slide instead of playing that again. So very quickly, device on the ground communicates directly to one of the Myriota satellites that's in low Earth orbit that you've just seen on the animation. And the data comes down into the cloud and then through to the user, where they can use that data to make their business better. Significantly, we communicate with those devices on the ground without needing to hop via a tower or an access point. If you can see the sky, you are connected, which is a really key piece of providing access for large areas and places like maritime areas and where devices are portable or mobile. It really simplifies deployment. So we have sensor and potential position data, things like that, coming from the device into the cloud. And in the other direction, configuring devices. So you might do things like be adjusting how much data you're getting, or which data you're getting, how often you're getting it. You could be controlling devices, and really importantly, being able to push firmware updates to deployed devices in the field. That's really critical. You can deliver new features for existing devices. So again, without having to visit them, because that's expensive to do. And also to provide constantly upgrade security. The ability to do firmware updates has been identified in the IoT industry as a key pillar of maintaining secure systems. This kind of IoT data delivered by Myriota is already in use by customers across a wide range of industry sectors, both in South Australia, in Australia, and in other countries around the world. And we're really pleased to see the level of engagement of South Australian state government stakeholders looking to further adopt not just the IoT data, but also the EO data from Cannard. So I think that's it from me. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks, Alex. So I will just put another reminder out there with regards to popping questions in the Q&A chat box. You don't have to wait to the end to do that. If you'd like to pop them in there at any time during this webinar, then please feel free to do so. So last but certainly not least, we have Jack Rintoul. So Jack studied a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering, Aerospace, at the University of New South Wales. During this time, he was introduced to the fascinating world of spacecraft design and operation, including an internship at Optus Satellites. Jack now works for Inovor Technology as a spacecraft systems and test engineer, where he has oversight of end-to-end product development and testing, including requirements definition and tracking, test procedure development, design reviews, and quality assurance for Inovor's satellite missions. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'll share some slides maybe. There we go. Excellent.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Wonderful to hear from the other presenters, giving a bit of background on Cannard. I'll provide a bit of information on Inovor as a company, and then discuss a little bit what the Cannard mission has meant for Inovor. So Inovor was established in 2012, kind of on the back of a QB50 CubeSat mission. And there was a bit of disappointment at the difficulty of working with kind of COTS systems out of the box. So Matt Tetlow, the CEO and founder, decided that we should do it ourselves. So Inovor develops satellite technologies to serve both government and commercial customers. And there's also a branch of Inovor completing electronic warfare engineering services out at DSTG. As I mentioned, Inovor develops turnkey satellite solutions from the kind of unit and subsystem level up. Got a range of customer missions that I'll get into in a second, along with some missions that Inovor is developing in-house. And as mentioned, there's the electronic warfare work that occurs out at DSTG. And we're also doing a lot of work in the space domain awareness sector, which is becoming more and more prevalent as space gets more congested. So the first mission that Inovor was contracted to complete was SmartSat, and that's carrying quite a similar payload to the EO payload that is on Cannard. So those missions hopefully will be able to work together and provide data that can kind of be referenced against each other. Quite a different mission is the Buccaneer main mission for DSTG, which will be used to calibrate the Dawn over the horizon radar network, one of Australia's crucial defence assets, and also carries an optical communications payload, which will be key as large networks of satellites are launched. They will be able to communicate through optical comms, creating really good connectivity around the world. Spirit is one of the other missions, and that's a collaborative kind of research mission through the Australian Space Agency. We're doing a lot of work with the Italian Space Agency and flying a few of their payloads. And finally, Cannard, which has been spoken about a bit, and I'll cover off some more of that in a moment. We're also developing the Hyperion and Skyros missions. These are really exciting missions as they're driven by Inovor internally with support from the defence sector. Hyperion will be carrying a large optical telescope, which will be able to conduct space domain awareness kind of capabilities from LEO looking out towards GEO. And the Skyros mission is kind of looking the other way, Earth observation with a machine learning component, which will provide really valuable data as well. I'll talk a little bit more about Cannard. As Alex mentioned, it's the first time that an IoT payload and EO payload have been flown on the same mission, and that presents a whole range of difficulties or challenges from a design point of view. The IoT payloads require really high fidelity and really sensitive kind of UHF RF communication, which means the rest of the bus has to be really quiet. However, with the EO payload on board, we need a large aperture in the side of the spacecraft. The spacecraft in orange is Cannard. You can see the lens of the EO payload coming out the side there. So the two payloads aren't exactly complementary in terms of mission requirements. So it's been a challenge, but a really exciting challenge to come up with a solution that will be able to support both payloads. And those challenges kind of move through to operations as well, utilizing the resources of the satellite efficiently so both payloads can execute their mission objectives. It's been really great working closely with Myriota and SmartSat. There's a huge kind of wealth of knowledge in the Australian space industry already, and the more that we can conduct missions like Cannard, the more that knowledge will grow, and Australia will become a really strong player in the space industry. I'll throw it back to you, Sarah.
Great, thanks, Jack. So that kind of concludes the presentation side of today. So we'll jump straight into Q&A. Again, you know, pop the questions in the chat, and we'll have a look at them as we go through. But one of the advantages of being the moderator is I get to ask my questions first. So the first one will go straight to you, Darin. So if you'd like, guys would like to unmute yourselves, that would be great. So firstly, why does the state government want to buy a satellite in the first place?
Thanks, Sarah. That's actually, yeah, it's been asked a few times, like, you know, why are you going to go buy a satellite? Why didn't you just buy one overseas? Or, you know, if you really wanted something, you could have probably got it for, sometimes people go, you know, half the price. And we go back to we're actually not interested, or, you know, this is important, but we don't want to buy or own a satellite. What we are trying to do is you know, buy some services that are going to go for 3 years, as Pete said. So those services, you know, typically you'll pay for that after the fact. And again, with South Australian government, we're saying, look, you'll have this information available for years coming down to you. We'll help develop the applications to go with it, but you know, you won't have to pay for that imagery, for example. We can just keep using it and running it. And it really does help, I think, the companies with cash flow. That's very important for startups, you know, to have that revenue that they can point to and identify. That's another thing we think is part of a healthy ecosystem. And I think I mentioned it before, you know, the other one is to get that flight heritage. It's very expensive to do. And typically you have to go overseas to build a lot of that, or partner up with people that are, you know, spread around the world, and this brings it all to home.
Great, thank you. So Pete, I'll throw to you next. So I mean, just in this group here, there's a you know, broad range of experience and phenomenal skill sets. But what are the range of skills that are needed to develop this sort of spacecraft and the services of a Cannini mission?
This is the exciting thing about this platform. We touch on just about all aspects of the STEM area. So through Alex's area, they do a lot of work in the processing and RF environments. With the Inovor, they've got a lot of engineers that need to be able to design power systems, electronics, structural design, need to understand the thermal flow. But also it's in the products that come out of it. So advanced sensors like these hyperspectral sensors need very sophisticated algorithms to try and draw out the information from those. So you can use AI techniques. We've got physicists that need to understand the bands and how they work. We're working very closely with agriculture and the other ground sectors, so we understand what particular parameters we're going to measure. So it just covers just about every discipline that I guess you can think of from in the engineering and science area.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So to give the people out there an idea on what that looks like in the team, how many people would be working on this right now?
Well, within just, I'll get Alex and Inovor to and Jack to confirm that. But we had our critical design review, and we had probably about 25 people involved, and a lot of them were from Myriota and Inovor. But from the research side, at the end of the day, when we start getting into the analysing the data and providing research and products that come out, we could potentially get in excess of 100 people involved in the research teams and industry. So it's very broad benefits, but one of the biggest benefit is giving those people experience with real spacecraft systems and real spacecraft data. And that's what we really need to build, as Darin said.
Yeah, great. It's phenomenal. So Alex, the next one is for you. Noting the amount of, I guess, attention that space is getting at the moment, I feel like we're on this tidal wave of energy. What are the challenges for Australian spacecraft operators breaking into that global market?
We're at a very pivotal point in time for, in particular, new space. There's opportunities to really be in very early to sort of establish a position in the global supply chain for either whole spacecraft or components or any aspect of mission design and launch and so on. So right now it's actually quite a small market because it's quite a new one. When we started Myriota back in 2015, we were basically making a bet that this kind of a industry would emerge within the time that we would need it to operate commercially, and it is doing that. So there's a really exciting opportunity, and the global competition that Australia is in is our growing and scaling up SMEs competing against similar organisations internationally who absolutely have the full support of their research agencies, space agencies, departments of defence and so forth. So there's that, not just, let's say, the private investment into those companies from a venture capital or commercial point of view, but also the public sector missions that are being flown. Let's face it, that's where companies like SpaceX got from where they started to where they are today. That's what's fueling companies like Rocket Lab, for example, and the blend between publicly funded missions and completely private missions varies over time. But yeah, we're still very early in that game, and so there's really market share for Australia to pick up if it wants to do that. I think in 10 years' time, it will be harder to get on the on-ramp to do that.
Yeah, great. Well, it sounds like you made a great decision back then.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack, one for you. So, I mean, you're deep in the design and the testing of this system. So, what do you see as the challenges facing Cannini now through to launch, and then the 3 years of operation?
Sure. I guess I covered off on kind of some of the main design challenges, being the payloads being having a quite different set of requirements. But I think a really kind of clever and novel solution has been developed, and it was really great having the CDR earlier this week and having the feedback on that solution. I think testing is the next challenge, again with the different payloads requiring quite different testing. We'll have to come up with a test plan that kind of exercises the system in a realistic way, and will provide us with the confidence that the spacecraft will operate on orbit. One challenge for Inovor will be supporting all 4 or 5 missions that are currently in development through this stage, and keeping everything on schedule. Obviously, everyone wants their spacecraft to go up as soon as possible, because it is going to offer so much great data and so much benefit to South Australia and Australia as a space ecosystem. So managing that will be a big challenge. And then operationally, finding a way to exercise both payloads as efficiently as possible, so that we can get as much data which will benefit kind of all of the people involved with the mission. So yeah, it's using the knowledge of the whole space industry to assist in developing those test plans, so that everything is covered off, as well as all the companies that have operated spacecraft before through defence and commercially. And the Australian space industry is amazing in the way that everyone is so generous with their advice and with their findings, that everyone's kind of building on each other's missions, and there's a real kind of community feel. And I think that will be key to overcoming the challenges facing Cannini.
Yeah, great, thank you. And a very, very quick one before we move on again. The term CDR has been used a couple of times here. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Yeah, the CDR is the Critical Design Review. So that's kind of where all the stakeholders in the mission come together, and I guess Inovor and the other companies as well provided a lot of detail about what the current state of the design was, what the plan was going forward, with a bunch of external reviewers. And the aim there is to basically get the tick of approval from everyone involved that they're happy with the design and the plan for the remainder of the mission, and that we can proceed to the manufacturing stage. Still kind of working through the outcomes of that review, as it was just at the start of the week. But it was a really, really great event, got heaps of feedback, and yeah, a lot of information that Inovor and the rest of the companies can implement and ensure that Cannard is a really good success.
Hey, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, it's one thing we didn't mention was the time frame. So at the moment, we're targeting a launch in early 23. So from CDR, as Jack's mentioned, the team's going to be flat out building the spacecraft and doing the full system testing, which is a very, very hectic stage of the program. And I saw Alex respond there. I'm not sure if that went out to everyone, but SpaceX has been selected as the launch provider for our amazing spacecraft.
Great, thanks, Pete. And congratulations to the team for successfully passing MCR. I know it is it's a big body of work to get through. Sorry, CDR.
CDR.
Oh, getting my review. Okay, so we've got a question from the audience, and Darin, I'll put this one to you, but happy for others to answer this as well. Are there any glaring gaps in the Australian space services sector, particularly around data management and selling space-generated data?
That's a really big question. Yes, glaring gaps. Look, I would put it in this frame. I think for decades, large nations with very large satellites, and especially when they belong to the sovereign state, so they've been used for security or national purposes like weather, have typified where data has moved from and to in space. And so that brings with it large infrastructure, but also it's been very often difficult to access or quite expensive. And what we're seeing now with new space is, I guess, much more easily accessible data, much more data in general, just moving through in terms of imagery, or like, as Alex said with Myriota, moving information from the ground and back down to the cloud and vice versa. There is a lot of potential to unlock that data. So for example, in imagery alone, when human analysts used to look for objects and debris or mapping for weather, you would often find a lot of cumbersome and sort of old school methods of processing. And now we're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning to really make sense out of a lot of that information. And the other one is, if we can bring the cost down so that you don't have to go to a big satellite provider to find out whether your car park is free, if you can just dial it into your app and say, is my car park free? And it looks it up for you and it charges you 5 cents. Because somehow it's accessed that through space, then I think that's the golden solution for us.
Oh, Pete, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think the other aspect to this is not that we can just get into it a lot more easily, and obviously we're up against all the competition, as Alex mentioned, but the big issue at the moment with our sort of current global challenges, political challenges, is sovereign capability. So the Department of Defence are working very hard at determining what are those capabilities, space capabilities, are really important that we must own and have control of. Because if it's not owned or controlled by us, we may lose it at the critical times. It may be sensitive information. And similar for the civil world, the government is certainly looking at all its critical infrastructure as well and trying to determine what parts must we own and operate in Australia. And when that's being established and defined as we speak, when that happens, then that'll actually should benefit our industry. It'll give us opportunities to actually get involved with supporting these sovereign space capabilities.
Yeah, Grant, we might stick with you while you've got your mic, Pete. With regards to, I guess, still on the sovereign topic, what are your thoughts with regards to Australian moving from the CubeSats, the Cannini sized, to the larger, the 200 kilogram type satellites?
I think that's a very important step for our industry, because there's some capabilities that simply won't fit into the smaller class spacecraft. Alex is lucky because his technology, he can fit into a small spacecraft and do that effectively. But if we want larger, more complex sensors that need to look at higher resolution on the ground, in some of those cases, you're more likely going to need larger level spacecraft. So I think it's really important we transition very quickly from the smaller to the hundreds of kilos type class spacecraft to support those areas, particularly in that important sovereign need to protect national security and our defence aspects.
Great, thank you. Darin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. Look, I think whoever asked that question sort of it's showing some knowledge about the space industry and where it's going. So we've sort of got this split between some of the very small satellites, which have been developed out of universities, to be quite frank, in the early days, and then the very large satellites. But certainly there is we think there's a sweet spot, and we've put this in the strategy around the 250 kilo class, 150 to 250 kilo. You get some synergies when you start getting a bit bigger. Sometimes it's easy to manage power and weight and energy, thermal management. But also, I think not only 5 years ago, you would have spent maybe a year's worth of engineering effort to reduce your weight by a few percent. And you'd spend a lot of time trying to make things smaller or carving out structure. Now with the cost of launch coming down exponentially, and they have been doing this for over a decade, now it's actually potentially easy just to take on the weight and pay for that cost in order to just accelerate your design. So I see the larger buses being able to do more sovereign missions, like carrying bigger optics, for example, and also radar payloads, but certainly making it faster just to get them up into space and just crack on with it.
Yeah, great. How times have changed.
Yeah,
great. Jack, one for you. So what has been the impact of Cannini on South Australian space industry so far, in your opinion?
Hopefully a lot, and hopefully a lot more to come. I think from Inovor's perspective, being exposed to more different types of payloads has enabled us and has kind of forced us to re-examine some of the technology that we have developed and make it more suitable for a larger range of missions. A big one is reducing the EMI, electromagnetic kind of interference generated by components inside the bus, which allows them to be used on these sensitive RF missions. I think personally, just being able to work with a larger range of people in the space industry has been really great for me, which is a bit selfish, but it's really exciting to see so many people involved with this mission, so many people getting more experience. I think Pete touched on that, and everyone kind of establishing these connections, kind of both personally and from a technology point of view, and creating a space industry that is really cohesive and will be able to support these missions. I think that's really important as we move into larger spacecraft, where a company might not be responsible for the whole spacecraft bus itself. It might provide the power system, it might provide the communications, and by having these discussions at this stage will really enable us to move forward quickly into those more capable, larger spacecraft.
All right, thanks, Jack. Alex, one for you. So you chose to set up Myriota in Adelaide. What would you say to other space companies or startups who are thinking about working in Adelaide?
Yeah, so when we started Myriota, we definitely wanted to have a headquarters in Adelaide, really because of access to the particular talent that we are building the company out of from a telecommunications engineering point of view and a space systems point of view, which perhaps at the time we were doing that was less widely known than it is now. So when we were, raising investment funds back in 2014, let's say, yeah, we would have to answer the question, why Adelaide? And no one has to answer that question anymore. It's not even asked. It is really the focal point of the space industry in Australia. And we sort of started the session talking about IAC and the establishment of the Australian Space Agency. Those things didn't happen out of a vacuum. Those things occurred when they did, really as a reflection of the building and emerging space industry that has then, now has been turbocharged through things like the SmartSat CRC and the Space Agency. So, it's a special time and it's a special place. So absolutely encourage people to think about SA if it's a space business for sure.
Yeah, great, definitely. So we are coming close-ish to the end, and I'll be handing it back to Jessica in about 4 or 5 minutes. But just to close out, I'd like each of you to have a think about, I guess, a closing remark or something that you'd like everybody to take away from either your experiences in Cannard or working in the Australian space sector, or anything that you would like the audience to take away with in 1 minute or less. And we'll go in alphabetical order. So Alex, that's you first.
Yeah, look, I think the Cannard is a great instance of collaboration across the space sector. It's a great example of that in South Australia and Australia more generally. And I think I'd like to really close by getting people to think about let's call it the halo effect around the mission. So Inovor have suppliers in advanced manufacturing that are providing high precision parts into the program. Myriota has local contract manufacturers that do electronics modules. That's one of our products that we sell then to OEMs who integrate those into ag tech products or energy metering products. And so it goes out and out, and people build applications and systems and solutions for managing our environment or making our farms better. So something that at one level seems like, oh, it's a nerdy space thing, actually spreads out across the whole economy. And excitingly, if you recall the animation I showed, those satellites, Cannard included, orbit the whole planet, which means that all those services can be exported. And that's a fantastic opportunity for the state and the country.
Perfect, thanks. Darin, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. It's a good question. I was thinking one of the things that really stands out for me is Australia. We have a fantastic country. We are 12th richest country in the world. We lead a phenomenally good life. And yet, I would argue that much of our wealth comes from selling rocks and crops, digging stuff up and flogging it overseas and then buying it back when somebody adds value. If we really are going to continue this way of life in the future, we have to have these smart, intellectual, value-added products that will meet the world's needs. And for that, we need a workforce that we're trying to build up and emerge as well. And the story I keep thinking of is I joined the Air Force very young to sort of do aerospace-y type things. And I was fortunate to spend many years overseas in the US and Canada and travel through Europe and see what was going on there. I'm now back in Adelaide, loving what's happening here. I'm seeing people come over from expats return from overseas, as you know, and they're coming back to work in Adelaide or in Australia to work in the space industry. And that is, I think, one of the biggest things to see. The cross-sharing in the ecosystem between the companies, as Alex mentioned, we're getting to that critical mass where, you can take a young engineer who's straight out of uni, get some experience maybe in Inovor, and then maybe move across to Myriota and then come back and you'll be complementing each other. I think that's the fantastic thing.
Yeah, you're so true. So true. We don't need to move to overseas now to gain experience. You just need to wander around lot 14 and yeah, that's great. Jack, over to you.
Yeah, I think Alex and Darin have summed up really well. It kind of comes back to developing that local capability and that supply chain. I think for a long time there was especially kind of in defences, the first instinct is to look, if there's a need, look overseas, who's got a product that can fill that void. And I think now it's slowly shaping into what can we either find in Australia, or what can we do to develop that capability in Australia. And I guess if you can develop that local capability organically through a mission like Cannard, then it kind of grows it from the roots up, and it establishes that local supply chain, as Alex touched on. And then once those supply chains are developed, the whole kind of space ecosystem can benefit from that. And the collaborative nature of the Australian space industry makes that a lot easier than if it was kind of more individual. So yeah, it's developing that local capability, which will just grow and lead to those export opportunities, as mentioned.
Wonderful, thanks, Jack. And last but not least, Pete.
First, I'd just like to reinforce what Alex said. It's a collaboration across Australia, which is critical. And for example, at our critical design review, we had the Space Agency and CSIRO also involved with experts and helping the team sort of move forward with their design and engineering. But I guess the thing that I think what's so fantastic about Cannard, we've got to build that next generation of space engineers. It's well acknowledged, or space technologists, we have got a huge shortfall in technologists to support space and defence related projects. A lot of the schools are similar. And so Cannard has been great. It's already had great effect with just the naming. We had dozens and dozens of schools and kids get really excited to be involved with that. Alex at Myriota is already starting to look at projects that we can run through schools to help kids understand space technology with his IoT sensors. And we're going to be doing the similar thing with Earth observation of school properties and things like that. So I think this is really important. We need to maximise the benefit of this exciting spacecraft and mission in getting those kids to move into science technology, so we do have the workforce available to support our sovereign capabilities.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So great answers all round. So that wraps up, I guess, the panel side of things. So my thanks to Alex, Jack, Darin, and Pete. And Jessica, I'll hand it back over to you to close us out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Huge thank you to each of you for your insights and your time today. It was great. The good news is it's been recorded, so it'll be available on our website, www.city.space. So if you did get a chance to catch it all, you can catch it there. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, so huge thank you again to our panel. We had Darin Lovett, Director of the South Australian Space Industry Centre, Pete Nikoloff, SmartSat Cannard Mission Director, SmartSat CRC, Jack Rintoul, Spacecraft Systems and Test Engineer, Inovor, Alex Grant, CEO at Myriota, Dr. Sarah Cannard, Industry Director at SmartSat CRC. And I have some really good news as well that I didn't say at the beginning of when I started, but if you are based in Sydney, we are doing an in-person event on the 7th of December, and it's going to be in partnership with Neighbourhood Earth. And Neighbourhood Earth is down at the ICC. It's an immersive, award-winning, multi-sensory experience that combines technology and science to tell the story of space exploration like never before. So we're giving away 50 complimentary tickets to attend that. And we'd love to meet some of you in person. Obviously, a lot of this has been online. So if you are based in Sydney, please check that out on the website. And yeah, our next session will be on Monday, our final session, Thriving in Space. That's a panel with UWA. So huge thank you again to all of our panelists, and I hope you all have a great weekend and a happy Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.